Emily Carter rolled her worn-out suitcase along the cobblestone street of Nyack, a quiet riverside town perched on the banks of the Hudson River in New York. The wheels clattered softly, blending with the gentle lapping of the river's waves. Nyack unfolded before her like a peaceful painting. White-painted wooden houses leaning into the golden light of sunset, the soft curve of the Tappan Zee Bridge connecting both shores. She stopped and took a deep breath. The air carried the scent of dry grass and the crisp bite of an American autumn. At 28, Emily, once a praised painter in Chicago, had come here to escape, to get away from the stares, the whispers, the lingering shadow of an old scandal. This was the place she chose to begin again, where her brushstrokes would no longer carry traces of the man who betrayed her. The small apartment she rented sat on a quiet street, its windows overlooking the Hudson. It wasn't fancy, just an old fireplace and a scratched-up wooden table where she set up her easel on day one. She hadn't brought much: a few changes of clothes, a box of paints, and a weathered sketchbook. She wanted to erase every memory of her ex-boyfriend in Chicago, the one who used her, profited off her reputation through gallery deals, and left her behind in the wreckage of broken trust. One crisp fall afternoon, with the river glowing red in the late sun, Emily walked into a cafe called By the River. The little shop sat tucked beside the Hudson, its wooden walls draped in dried ivy, foggy glass windows catching the last soft light. Inside, the smell of roasted coffee mingled with the scent of old wood, creating a warm, oddly comforting atmosphere. Emily chose a table by the window, where she could watch the river drift by in silence. She opened her sketchbook, her hand moving slowly, tracing the curve of the Tappan Zee Bridge, the blur of a figure standing near the water's edge. But her gaze wandered, tinged with sadness, like her past still lingered in every pencil stroke. Behind the counter stood James Sullivan, quietly watching. At 35, he had a calm, thoughtful presence, slightly messy brown hair, deep blue eyes behind thin-framed glasses. He wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, hands now used to brewing coffee, even though they once danced across piano keys. James had been a talented pianist, performing in glittering halls across New York City. But now, he ran a small riverside cafe. Why he gave up music was a secret he kept even from his regulars. He noticed Emily from the first day she walked in. It wasn't her looks. She wore a plain gray sweater and a beige scarf. It was her eyes. Eyes that seemed to carry a whole story untold. Every afternoon, she came in, sat at the same spot, sketching or just staring out at the water. James never asked anything. He simply brought her coffee, set it down with a quiet smile. She's like me, he once thought, running from something. One evening, after the cafe had emptied out, James was wiping glasses behind the counter, warm yellow light casting soft shadows on his face. His eyes happened to glance at a phone left behind by a regular. The screen was still lit up. A headline caught his eye. Young painter Emily Carter, love scandal or artistic stunt. He froze. The article was about the girl from Chicago, betrayed by her boyfriend, an art critic, who had used her name for personal gain and left her when things got tough. There was a photo, too. Emily at a press conference 2 years ago, eyes red and teary. James looked up. Emily was still there, by the window, pencil in hand, sketching slowly. The cafe's light fell gently across her face, highlighting those deep eyes and slightly trembling lashes. She didn't know he was watching. Didn't know he had read anything. Quietly, he turned off the phone's screen and set it back down, like he had just touched something he shouldn't have. She doesn't need anyone digging up the past, he thought. He chose silence, no questions, no comments. But in his heart, something had started to stir. A strange sense of connection to the stranger who had quietly stepped into his life. Outside, the Hudson River kept flowing, quiet, steady, and patient. Light from the cafe spilled onto the water, shimmering like broken pieces of hope. Emily looked up, her gaze drifting across the river, unaware that James from behind the counter was watching her too. Two people, two wounded pasts, had unknowingly crossed paths in a moment that felt like fate. And their story, like the river itself, was just beginning. Autumn days in Nyack passed slowly, like the rhythm of the Hudson outside the window of By the River. Emily Carter gradually became part of the place. Every afternoon she came in with her sketchbook and sat at the same window table. Her pencil strokes started coming alive again. Misty outlines of the Tappan Zee Bridge, golden leaves falling gently, the river shimmering under the glow of evening lights. She wasn't just drawing to escape anymore. She was drawing to find herself again. And James Sullivan, from behind the counter, quietly witnessed that change. They started talking more. At first, it was just small talk. "How's the coffee today?" James would ask, placing the cup on her table with a soft smile. "A bit better than yesterday," Emily would reply, a rare, playful glint in her eyes. Over time, those small exchanges opened little doors. Emily talked about art, about how she had adored Monet's paintings as a child, about the mornings in Chicago when she'd draw by the window and forget to eat. But she always stopped at the edge of her past. Never mentioned the scandal. Never spoke of the man she once loved. James understood. He never asked. One afternoon, as a light drizzle tapped against the windows, Emily sat curled up by the glass, watching raindrops race down the pane. "Have you ever painted?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James paused, drying a cup, then looked up. "No," he said quietly, "but I used to play music." Emily tilted her head, curious. James exhaled, set the glass down, his hands tightening for a moment before he relaxed. "Piano," he said. "I used to perform in New York City, Carnegie Hall, big venues, bright lights. But then it ended." "What happened?" she asked gently. James looked out at the river, eyes distant. "My best friend, he was also my manager, betrayed me. Took the money, the credit, the gigs, left me with nothing but an empty bank account and a heart that didn't know who to trust anymore." He gave a small, bitter laugh. "I quit the piano, opened this place. It's simpler. No one can take it from me." Emily stayed quiet, her gaze softening, as if she'd found a familiar chord in his story. "Art can be a double-edged sword, can't it?" she murmured, then turned back to her sketchbook, as if to gently close the conversation. From that day on, they grew closer, but always kept a quiet space between them. James would bring her coffee without needing to ask, sometimes leaving a small cookie on the saucer. Emily would smile her thanks, and sometimes she'd tell him about the colors she loved most: Chicago's blue skies, Nyack's warm autumn gold. They were like two lines that had crossed once, not yet knowing if they'd run parallel or drift apart. Then one morning, everything shifted. James was tidying the counter when he spotted an envelope tucked into the cafe's mail stack. Clearly a postal mix-up. The name on it stopped him cold. Emily Carter. The address was unmistakable: Luminos Gallery, Los Angeles. His hands paused mid-motion, a slight tremble. Not from curiosity, but from instinct. He opened it. The letter was in English, formal, and to the point. It invited Emily to take part in a major winter exhibition. The catch? Her pieces had to be commercial, easy to sell, flashy enough to draw attention. And most jarringly, they encouraged her to lean into her past, to use her old scandal as a marketing tool to pull in the press and public. James stood still, the letter slipping from his hand onto the counter. He glanced toward Emily, who was quietly sketching, sunlight pouring through the window and lighting up her hair like spun gold. Memories rushed back to him. Bright stage lights, thunderous applause, and then the sting of betrayal by his closest friend. Is she just like him? He wondered, a heaviness settling over his chest. He wanted to believe Emily was different, that she wasn't the kind of person who would exploit pain for fame. But this letter, it cut into that fragile trust like a blade. All day, James was quieter than usual. When he brought her coffee, he didn't smile, didn't say a word. Emily noticed something was off, but she didn't mention it. She just kept drawing, her strokes slower than usual, as if sensing the invisible wall growing between them. Back behind the counter, James gripped the edge of the wooden bar until his knuckles turned white. He wrestled with it. Should he say something? Or wait, hoping she would open up? He remembered her sorrowful eyes that first day she walked in. The way she talked about art, not with ambition, but with honest passion. But that letter still sat there, like a thorn that refused to be pulled out. That evening, by the river glowed in its usual golden light. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving shimmering puddles along the cobblestone street. Emily stood up, slipped her sketchbook into her bag, and turned to James. "Thanks for the coffee," she said softly. James nodded without replying. As she stepped out into the night, he watched her silhouette fade into the dark. Then he picked up the letter again, read it one more time, and quietly folded it, slipping it into the drawer beneath the counter. "Maybe I just need time," he whispered to himself. The Hudson River flowed on, a silent witness. Light from the cafe flickered on the surface, like little fragments of color buried deep in the hearts of two people standing at an emotional crossroads. James didn't know that, just beyond the door, Emily was carrying her own unanswered questions, and a secret she wasn't yet ready to reveal. As fall in Nyack edged into colder days, the wind off the Hudson carried hints of the winter to come. The warmth inside by the river remained, but something had shifted between Emily Carter and James Sullivan. Since the day James read the letter from Los Angeles, he had become more withdrawn. His rare smiles stopped appearing when he served Emily her coffee, and their brief conversations grew fewer and further between. Emily felt it, but she didn't ask. She simply kept drawing, her eyes occasionally drifting toward him, as if searching for a silent answer. One evening, with only a few customers left in the cafe, Emily sat by the window with a half-finished cup of coffee. She looked up and broke the silence. "I'm heading to Los Angeles soon," she said, her voice gentle but tinged with excitement. "There's a big exhibition. They want me to show my work." James, wiping down the counter, froze mid-motion. He turned to her, his deep blue eyes clouding with something unreadable. "Los Angeles," he repeated quietly. "Sounds great." But in his mind, the letter from Luminos resurfaced vividly, the lines suggesting she leverage her old scandal to stir public interest. His hand tightened around the towel he was holding. Emily smiled, unaware of the storm churning inside him. "I've done so much painting here," she continued, gesturing to her sketchbook. "Nyack has really inspired me. I want people to see these paintings, not because of the past, but because of what they are now." She spoke with such sincerity, her eyes lighting up with artistic passion. But for James, every word felt like another wound. He remembered his old friend's promises to take him to the top, before stealing everything. Was Emily really any different? Or was she just another artist wearing a mask? He couldn't hold it in anymore. "So, you're going to use your past to get famous again?" he blurted, his voice colder than she'd ever heard it. Emily blinked, caught off guard. Her eyes widened. What are you talking about?" she asked, voice trembling. James stepped out from behind the counter, walking toward her, his hand still clenching the towel like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "I know about the exhibition," he said, trying to stay calm but failing. "I know what they're asking for. Scandal, drama, all of it. You're going along with that, aren't you?" Emily shot to her feet, her sketchbook falling to the table. "You really think I'm that kind of person?" she cried, tears welling in her eyes. James didn't answer, but the look on his face, wounded, full of doubt, said it all. Emily stepped back, her hands trembling. "I thought you were different," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought you understood me, but in the end, you see me like everyone else does, just another opportunist." She turned and bolted out the door, leaving the cafe wrapped in a heavy silence. Outside, the rain had returned, cold droplets slapping her face as she walked along the riverbank. She didn't cry, but her heart felt shattered. James, whom she had come to see as a rare comfort in the storm of her life, had turned out to be just another stranger, ready to judge her without asking for the truth. The lights from by the river faded behind her like a memory dissolving into the night. Inside, James stood frozen, watching her disappear into the rain. He wanted to run after her, but his legs felt rooted to the floor. Slowly, he returned to the counter, hands trembling as he opened the drawer and pulled out the letter from Los Angeles. He read it again, each word stabbing at his pride. Then, with a frustrated breath, he slammed it onto the counter and sank into a chair, burying his head in his hands. "What did I just do?" he whispered, voice cracking. That night, sleep never came. James sat in the cafe long after closing, the old laptop glowing in the corner as he aimlessly scrolled through his email, a half-conscious habit to distract himself from the emptiness gnawing at him. But then, something unexpected. A draft email from Emily's account. She must have logged in once on his laptop to check her inbox and left it open. It hadn't been sent, just a draft. But as he opened it, the words made his chest tighten. "Thank you for the invitation, but I must decline your request to produce commercial-style pieces or to use my past for publicity. I came to Nyack to reconnect with real art, not to sell it short. My paintings will speak for themselves. No gimmicks, no headlines." James read it over and over again. Each sentence hit him like a punch to the gut. He had been wrong. Completely, painfully wrong. Emily wasn't using anyone. She wasn't chasing fame. She was like him, a wounded soul trying to heal through her craft. He stood, eyes drifting to the rain-streaked window. The Hudson kept flowing. The cafe felt emptier than ever. And James realized he had just pushed away the one thing that had quietly become the most precious part of his life. Not because she left, but because he had driven her away. After the argument, Emily Carter left Nyack on a gray, overcast morning. She rolled her suitcase along the cobblestone street by the Hudson, without once looking back at by the river. The rain had stopped, but the cold still clung to the air, like it was trying to make her stay. Los Angeles greeted her with bustling streets, neon lights, and the constant hum of traffic, a world apart from Nyack's stillness. The Luminos exhibition was a huge opportunity, but her heart felt hollow. The paintings she brought, the misty Tappan Zee Bridge, the glimmering river, the shadow of a man behind a cafe counter, each one carried traces of James Sullivan, though she would never admit it aloud. Back in Nyack, James was drowning in regret. The cafe still opened its doors every day, but he no longer brewed coffee with the same care. Every time he passed the window seat, he saw her there, quiet, sketching, with that distant look in her eyes. The email she wrote haunted him. He had been so wrong. But he couldn't bring himself to reach out. She deserves better than me, he told himself, his fingers brushing over the dust-covered keys of the old piano tucked into the corner of the cafe. He hadn't played in years, but now music felt like the only way left to say the words he couldn't. Emily threw herself into work in Los Angeles. Her first exhibition was a stunning success. Guests marveled at the warmth of her colors, and the press celebrated the return of a rising star. But when the lights went out, she sat alone in her small apartment, staring into the distance, missing the Hudson. Her paintings weren't just art. They were memories, whispers of someone she had left behind. One night she picked up her pencil and began to sketch James's face. Those deep blue eyes, that quiet, wounded smile. Then she crossed it out, and tears fell onto the paper. "I can't forget," she whispered. Back in Nyack, James returned to the piano. He sat down, his fingers trembling as they hovered above the keys. The first notes were awkward, rusty, but slowly they began to flow, like the river outside his window. He composed a piece and named it "The Waiting Light," for Emily. Each key carried an apology, a longing, a fragile hope that somehow she'd hear it. He recorded the song and sent it anonymously to the curator of Emily's exhibit in Los Angeles, along with a simple note: "Play this on the final night. She'll understand." The final night of the exhibit arrived. The gallery buzzed with people, lights blazing across Emily's paintings. She stood among the crowd, smiling politely, but her heart felt heavy. Suddenly, the speakers began to play a slow, soulful piano melody. Emily froze. Her heart pounded. The music was unfamiliar, yet hauntingly close, like a memory rising from deep within. Golden afternoons by the Hudson, James's voice speaking softly about music, the warm glow of the cafe lights. The crowd fell silent. A few bowed their heads, moved by the quiet power of the song. Emily looked around, tears welling uncontrollably. "James," she whispered, clutching her chest. The piece ended to a burst of applause. But for Emily, it was more than music. It was an apology, a call home. She didn't wait. That very night, she booked a train back to Nyack, leaving behind the glitz of Los Angeles. The train cut through fog-covered fields, but she didn't look out the window. Her eyes stayed fixed ahead, on a small riverside cafe waiting in the dark. By the time she arrived in Nyack, it was late. She walked down the familiar cobblestone street, her breath turning to mist in the cold air. The light from by the river still shone, dim but steady, like it had been waiting for her. She pushed the door open. The cafe was empty, except for James at the old piano, his fingers dancing over the keys, replaying The Waiting Light. He didn't look up right away, but as the melody slowed, he felt her presence. He stopped playing and lifted his head. There she was, standing in the doorway, her hair damp with night fog, her eyes red but glowing. They looked at each other, and time seemed to freeze. No one spoke. Only the sound of the Hudson flowed softly through the window. Emily stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "The light by the river's still on, isn't it?" James stood and moved toward her, his eyes softer than ever. "For one person only," he replied gently. She smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks. No long apologies. No need for explanations. Emily reached out and took his hand, tight, like she was afraid to let go. James pulled her into his arms, holding her close in silence. His warmth pushed away the chill of the winter night, just like the cafe's light pushing back the darkness. Outside, the Hudson River kept flowing. Quiet, steady, patient. The light from the cafe shimmered across its surface like puzzle pieces finally finding their place. Emily and James stood by the window side by side, gazing out at the water. A perfect painting unfolded, her head resting on his shoulder, his hand gently brushing her hair, the golden light wrapping them in warmth. Their love wasn't flawless. It had cracks, misunderstandings, but in the end it was strong enough to bring them back. Like the river always finds its way to the sea, like the light always waits for someone to come home.